what are the examples of product management skills that you have faced or were tested the most in your product journey?
Sure, Samyak. So that's a great question, by the way, because while it is easy to sort of talk about the skills you think you would need to sort of succeed as a product manager, when you are actually in market building products, different levels of skills will be tested at to different degrees, because that will depend on a lot upon the context of the product you are building, right? Because and I basically come from a background where I've been fortunate enough to build products at scale, because when you build products for millions of consumers or millions of customers, right, you get into those waters which may not have been tested very well. So for example, the idea is that one of the key pointers which come in, for example, stakeholder management. When you especially work in organizations which have multiple teams and which have large structures defined in a certain way. Stakeholder management, for example, has been a skill which is not very usually talked about in product management, because it is considered to be a life skill. Like, it is needed Absolutely. For every role, irrespective, right? But for product, it has a very different flavor to it. And the reason why I say that is because of the fact that, considering product manager is at the center of the product, he or she is actually interacting with stakeholders of a different degree of scale, because that person, for example, is also going to the customer support to talk about what kind of feedbacks or issues are coming on the product, as well as talking to a salesperson in terms of getting into her zone or his zone to understand how to sell this product, because the salesperson will essentially focus on the key aspects of the product, and he or she will give you a dress down on the product if that does not work out, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And at the same point of time, the product manager has to also have the acumen to talk to leadership, to present his or her ideas to leadership, to the management of the organization when you are talking about your product, and also justifying what kind of actions you do. So switching that context with every stakeholder you are talking to at different points of time is a very practical skill which I have sort of observed, because unless you are able to do that, and if you're not able to fit in the right context at the right place at the right time, that creates issues, because you'll then not be able to A, gauge pointers from them, or B, communicate your thoughts effectively. So stakeholder management has been like a real surprise element which came in when I was building products, and it needed me to sort of adapt into and understand stakeholder management very well. So that's
very interesting thought. And as you move up the ladder in a corporate, you have to directly deal with the people who are invested in the company. That becomes even more difficult. So how to tackle that? Because product managers who want to upgrade it to product leaders, what can be the best way to deal with stakeholder management?
See, fundamentally it is, in my view, it is very important, and which is also some sort of a life skill, which I feel is the fact that understanding or solidifying your basics is like the first precursor one should do, in my view, because even if you're talking to the highest levels of the leadership in your organization, or if you are sort of growing or maturing or are looking to mature as a product leader, you will not be able to do a good job unless you know the basics of your product, right? And which is not just generic product management, but also basics of the product you want to build upon. So you are required to be aware of what are the product metrics you are trying to solve, or what does your product fundamentally do. Because you will not survive, in my view, if you are a good leader, but you don't understand specifics of the product. Right?
So can I say sounding more confident with these matrices? Because you know the matrices, you can be more confident about it. If you're not aware, then it becomes a hell for you.
It does 100% to that point. And just to add on to that point, the way you can sound more confident is by again reiterating that point that you are basically understanding your basics or not, and B, are you able to actually talk to different folks at different points of time to understand the different aspects of product which you may otherwise not get. So hence it is important that you communicate very well and you communicate frequently, and hence you focus upon the fact that even if you grow as a product leader, always find times to conduct reviews, not just with your teams, but also with your consumers or also with your stakeholders, whether they are internal or external. Always find time for that is what I feel, because that kind of a feedback which you get is a validation of what your team is talking about,
Absolutely.
as well as a direct in-person feedback which you can actually consider and consume to look at what are the things which you should look to impart upon the product. And that kind of also gives you something which is called as forward thinking. You can always you will be able to come up with better ideas to reform your product only when you are sort of listening to your product feedbacks, right? So combining those gives you that, it naturally, according to me, will give you that acumen to come up with path breaking ideas to reform your product or shape up or build a new product completely. So it's that way.
Interesting. You have talked about stakeholders. Very interesting question that I have been asked multiple times. How to prioritize some of the features related to your product or related to your vertical that you are managing? Because that also includes stakeholder management. I can relate to my journey where people from sales, people from business development, people from investors as well ask for a lot of requirements and I have to deal with those. So what do you think, how to prioritize product features?
That's $1 million question, by the way, right? Because everywhere and anywhere, you get this point very well that as a product manager, and especially in organizations or startups which have kind of grown very fast, or large organizations, you'll have multiple stakeholders. We just talked about that, right? So I think the way of prioritizing features, because you'll get requirements from just too many stakeholders, left and right, and every stakeholder would naturally want his or her requirement to be prioritized, but you know that you have limited bandwidth, you will always have limited capacity, and hence the idea is to understand 2 or 3 aspects according to me. One is, what are you wanting to achieve from an organization point of view in a particular period of time? And when you say you wanting to achieve, it basically means what are your objectives, right? You might be looking at increasing revenue, or you might be looking at acquiring new consumers or improving product experience. So get that right. And ask the right questions is what the idea is, to get that understanding. Then use that to identify what are your product metrics that you need to, might be looking at increasing revenue, or might be looking at acquiring new consumers or improving product experience. So get that right. And ask the right questions is what the idea is, to get that understanding. Then use that to identify what are your product metrics that you need to work upon to sort of be directly aligned or be proportional to that particular objective, right?
Interesting.
And once you have been able to discover those pointers that, okay, these are my product objectives which I need to solve for in this particular period, then filter every requirement with the fact that whether it is helping in sort of improving this metric or not. If there are requirements which are on the opposite side of the metrics or the objectives which you have defined for that particular period, then you know for sure that these are not the requirements which should be picked up now. And once you have that clarity, because you are able to connect the bigger picture with what you are wanting to build or achieve, then you are basically able to more logically first understand what should be the prioritization order. So it's a 2-step variable. Understand the prioritization order and communicate to the stakeholders. And when you are able to logically derive what should the prioritization order be, then be as transparent and upfront to your stakeholders is what I've always found out to be working better. Because rather than hiding, it is important what you say as no means no, right? You have to say no when it is important, rather than giving an overcommitment. Sometimes product managers do overcommit a lot, which I don't blame anyone, because it happens, but in the long run it may not be the most effective approach according to me. So basically those 2 pointers.
Got it. So can I say overcommitment is obviously a very, very I would say prominent issue in product managers, and does it reduce over time? Because estimation is also a very important skill. Does it reduce over time, or if let's say you want to accelerate that process of making better estimations, what could be those pointers, or how you can learn, how you can process that?
See, ideally, one thing which is important is that this will always come with practice and with giving a lot of time to your product, because initially I personally sort of expect my product managers or even myself to do the right due diligence and then come up with the impact rather than estimating without factual data or insights. Because unless and until you do that, you then improve upon your time of coming up to with those assumptions or with those metrics, and it also basically helps in improving the accuracy of the calls which you take without data, because not every time you will have access to data, right? So it is important that for initial few months when you are sort of building a new product, or if you are an early product manager, an entry level PM for instance, and you base most of your decisions by analyzing data, and once you sort of do that, you put it on a loop exercise, then you will anyways be getting better and better in terms of understanding the impact of a product without requiring to look at data. And then you sort of become more and more better in terms of taking gut-based calls, which are as much closer to the accurate impact than what it would have been earlier. The wrong thing to do is follow the reverse order, according to me. So it's a time-based game. It will take patience that you have to look at data for the initial few projects every time, or it is recommended to take most of the times. But if you do that, then it's a logical curve, right? Because you've been able to, your mindset has been evolved in terms of taking decisions much accurately, because you have taken the previous decisions by looking at data. So it's like that.
I can definitely relate to my own personal experience because I spend a lot of time understanding data. I at least spend 2 to 3 hours looking at my mixed panel events and how people are using the product, and also which includes a lot of conversation with a lot of our customers or users. So one important skill that Abhishek has mentioned is definitely looking at the data. That I feel is the crux of product management, along with experience.